Mikey P, Mike Probosi here for In the Money Media YouTube channel. Normally PTF in this chair hosting for these Derby prep previews, but PTF's traveling this week. So you get Mikey P and you get the author of the Derby Top 10 on In the Money Media, Eric Decoster. Glad to be with you here looking at another Derby prep.
Yeah, this is an exciting one. Every single one from here on out is exciting, but we got a lot of nice horses that have something to prove, right? It's put up or shut up time for every horse on the Derby Trail at this point, but especially this group. That's what's going to make it such a fun race to go over and then watch on Saturday.
Tampa Bay Derby this weekend at Tampa Bay Downs. And Mount a 16th here. Now we're a couple months out from the Derby, so a lot of times horses that prep in this race, you can get into the Derby if you win it, but a lot of horses will have another prep prior to the Kentucky Derby for in between here. So you have to kind of look at these horses as ones that are maybe taking just another step on the road to the Derby. Eric, I saw the video this week and not a lot of movement in your top 10 list. Anybody that wants to check that out on the In the Money YouTube channel, JK and PTF, run through your list and let's just talk about that a little bit. I know you had some movement, at least some shuffle at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I said it in the Players podcast from last week. I said the top three was basically interchangeable, and that was Barnes, Journalism, and Sovereignty. Not in that order, but those were the three. And then they all showed out as the three best horses from the three preps this past week. So that was obviously really exciting from that perspective. We ended to go watch it, but I didn't have Journalism number one because I didn't have him above Sovereignty last week, and Sovereignty ran the race I needed him to run in that Fountain of Youth victory. So I couldn't knock him down for doing everything I needed him to do, even with that big buyer Journalism through. But it'll be fun. I mean, it's 1 and 1A at this point at the top, and then kind of that 2 and 2B, if you will, or I guess it'd be 3 and 3C would be Barnes and Citizen Bull, the Baffert stablemates.
Well, lots of intrigue this weekend with the return of a couple Chad Brown runners here in this Tampa Bay Derby. We'll run through the field. 7 horses here this weekend. It's race number 11 at Tampa Bay. Straight 3-year-olds are going for $400,000 here. And Eric, let's just run through the field here. The number 1 is Owen Almighty. Now, he's raced in a couple of the Tampa Bay preps so far. He's raced well. He won the Pasco Stakes. He was second to John Hancock, and he very easily could have won that race. However, he didn't. What's your take on him going in here?
I think he's a very interesting horse. It doesn't seem like the pace will be as brutal as it was last time out. And even then, he did a good job sticking in through fractions that weren't super beneficial to him. At least in my eyes, it felt like he had to work pretty hard. That being said, he did draw the rail, so he's going to have to send, and he certainly cannot afford to miss the break because he's going to want a clean face. I've read word that he is not. They don't have a lot of confidence in him from a distance perspective. Obviously, not stepping up here, but every single furlong, every single yard matters. It seems with this horse, and obviously stepping up from that last race. Same racetrack, same circuit, but tougher company. It's going to be a big acid test for him, and I don't have a ton of confidence in him to answer the call just because of how tough this group is that's been assembled.
He's an interesting horse, though, because I do think he has a bit of a pace edge over some of these. He has recency, which is another positive in his factor. Irad seems to like him. He's stuck with all 3 spots here so far, and there's a possibility he could be by himself up front. That would make him a lot more interesting to me, but you're right. And he has to kind of see it through there, that last 16th of a mile, because some of these, the big ones are going to be flying late. Let's talk about number 2, Chancellor McPatrick. Now, this horse was a fantastic 2-year-old, a couple grade 1 wins, had the PTF stamp of approval after that maiden win at Saratoga there back on July the 27th. He proclaimed him the Derby winner that day. Now, the juvenile didn't go the way they want to. Drew the outside post, and he's a come from behind type. Gets blinkers here. I know that I've read in the forum, Chad Brown said maybe that this is just a stepping stone for him. Maybe not all the way back, but Prat's here. They're ready to hit the 3-year-old trail.
It's a tough read. It really is. Both Chad Brown horses we'll talk about are, I feel, because he did mention he probably would like a little more time with both of them, but he needs to get them on the Derby trail and run in the afternoons. The class is there with this horse. You get Prat in town. He opts to ride this one over Patch Adams. That's telling in its own right. And then, you mentioned the blinkers going on. That should really shore up a lot of his issues early on. He has a horse who clearly has no interest in being involved early. So we'll see if the blinkers help clean that up. I think that at the end of the day, you mentioned Owen Almighty could get alone on the lead. I think there's a few others we'll talk about that will make or break how this race sets up, and as a result will make or break how well Chancellor McPatrick runs. I don't blame anyone for siding with him here. I think he's certainly going to improve off this race, and perhaps next time, and then especially if he gets to the first Saturday in May, that's when he'll really pique my interest.
Yeah, we saw a couple comebackers with Class this past weekend show up and stamp themselves a little bit further along than maybe some thought. So let's go to the number 3 here, the other Chad Brown, Hill Road. Now this one came over and raced in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile back on November 1st after a couple nice races over in Ireland. I mean, broke the maiden first out by big lengths and then ended up in a grade 1. Now finished 7th there. He was one of very few that closed in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Now you get Chad Brown, you get blinkers, you get Gaffalione. Really, Chad is no stranger to getting these 3-year-olds ready to roll here on that Triple Crown trail. So what's your thoughts on that one?
You have to give him some consideration in here just because of what you mentioned, the fact he closed so nicely in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile, outkicked his now stablemate Chancellor McPatrick, outkicked Ferocious, who was obviously causing his own problems, but still he was more professional that day and obviously finished ahead of him. And he was able to get by Getaway Car, who ran 4th that day, but had a much better trip than him and a much better pace flow, and still was able to outkick that horse who's now gone on to win a major stakes on this Derby trail. So there's tons of talent. You just got to wonder once again, is he ready for this race? Will the race play out in his favor? I'm still a little skeptical. Once again, another one I definitely want come late March, early April, and then the first Saturday in May if he gets there.
The number 4 in the race is Brodeur. Now this is a Mark Casse, Jose Ortiz charge here. 2 straight wins. Nice win at Oaklawn there in a maiden race on December 14th. Then went into a 2-life optional claimer. Now 2 wet track wins for him. He certainly bred very well for distance. He's by Nyquist out of a Pulpit mare. So these Casse runners certainly play wherever they go. Jose Ortiz certainly sharper than any jockey, I think, on the planet right now. He's speedy. I do think he needs to improve. No Lasix here, so there are some questions.
For sure. And when I mentioned that make or break aspect, this is the horse. This is the horse who will define how Owen Almighty runs, and as a result, Chancellor McPatrick, Hill Road, and a few of the others we'll talk about here in a second. He has a lot of natural early speed. That's why he was able to break his maiden over 6 furlongs on the front end, backed that up, stretching out to 2 turns with that other than victory you mentioned. And once again, speed was his weapon those days on that wet track, and he used it to full effect. How hard he goes after Owen Almighty early, whether Irad maybe lets Jose go and tries to sit off of him instead, switch off the inside, always a possibility. It's going to be a bit of a game of chess between the Ortiz brothers, really, and that always could lead to the potential of an explosion. Those two cook each other, and then you get your off the pace types who take advantage of it, or they could take care of each other. It's not just an Ortiz brothers things. These 2 horses are the 2 key speeds in the race, and if they want to run 1-2 the entire way and see who the best horse is down the lane, that's their right. So it's like I said, it's going to be very interesting how Jose goes about this. But if he plays his cards right, he could have a chance from a tactical perspective.
Well, since we're halfway through the field here, more than half, let's have a word from our sponsor, and that's TwinSpires.com. Huge into the tournament scene right now. If you listen to the Players Pod this week, Darren Sakali mentioned that they're starting the TwinSpires.com tour. So for the month of March, the TwinSpires.com tournament leaderboard will be in effect, and there are prizes with that. If you check out the feeders this week, there's Turfway feeders, Fairgrounds feeders, all that lead into that Tampa Bay Derby KDBC qualifier on March the 8th. $250 bankroll, $250 to the prize pool. Get a seat for that KDBC. So and that's a huge seat, $5,000 buy-in to that KDBC. So they have a $250,000 guaranteed prize pool, plenty of extra seats, Derby tickets, so many things on offer for that Kentucky Derby betting challenge. So check out TwinSpires.com, go to the tournament tab, and get in on some of those contests. They're fantastic. Let's finish here, Eric. We got 3 more to go, and the 5 in the race is Filoso. This is a Chad Summers returnee. Tried the Breeders' Futurity last fall. Ended up 3rd in there, faced East Avenue, and this one closed up in that race on a racetrack that would be considered, I thought, pretty speed favoring. Tried the Kentucky Jockey Club, another racetrack that really didn't favor his style necessarily. Now you get blinkers, you get the return, you get Dylan Davis, who is familiar, broke the maiden with the horse. A little long shot chance for this one?
I think he's a really interesting horse. If you've followed along with our top 10 and other contenders page on inthemoneypodcast.com that I put together, you'd know I think this horse has a lot of ability. He just hasn't had the right setups in his last few races, the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland, and then last time out at Churchill in November in the Kentucky Jockey Club. It just hasn't gone his way. He's a deep closer. He needs to wind up, and he needs some pace horses to back up into his face a little bit. So that's not encouraging to hear for this race. As I've mentioned, the pace scenario doesn't seem like it'll play to the closers unless something wild happens, in which case Filoso is going to be coming late again with a little bit of a kick, but at the end of the day, probably just a bit short. But just like Hill Road and Chancellor McPatrick, I'm going to give him a bit of an excuse if that's how it plays out, and be happy to go back to him in a final prep if that's what they choose to do.
Yeah, he's a little class to him also. I mean, he was in the incentive pay maiden race at Saratoga. That was a nice race that produced some next out winners. And then, beat American Promise, breaking his maiden. That's a decent horse, was stuck against the racetracks in his last 2. So I do think an intriguing long shot there in this Tampa Bay Derby. Let's move to the 6, Naughty Rascal here. Now, this is another one that's been hanging out, taking in the preps up into the Tampa Bay Derby here. Was 2nd in the Pasco, ended up tiring in the Sam F. Davis after what looked like a pretty good trip there. I mean, he had dead aim on the top 2 and then, got to the final turn and went backwards. What's your take on him? I think long shot.
I agree. It felt like the last race, the Sam F. Davis was the opportunity to prove himself against a slightly lighter group. He had done a really good job up to that point, staying consistent on the circuit, running big races against some decent horses. Obviously had that weird run against Owen Almighty in the Pasco. And he really showed some heart that day, but he didn't show it next time out. Maybe it was a bit of a regression after such a big race. It was back kind of quick. So you maybe make an excuse for that, and he'll be better for that last race. But it certainly would be a bit of a surprise if he was able to revert that form to that effect and beat this kind of group.
Well, let's get to the last big contender in here, and that's the 7, Patch Adams. Now, this is a Brad Cox trained, plenty of hype horse coming out of that Stars of Tomorrow card on November 30th at Churchill. Was in a maiden race there, but a 98 Beyer Blitz, 10.5 length win, ends up in the Southwest Stakes on January the 25th at Oaklawn. Didn't get the best start, was 4-5 in that race. And, I thought raced in spots. The poor start was a little different for him. Ended up making a move to get up to 2nd in the race, but was overcome by Sandman and then Tistastic very late in there. I know off air you said you liked him in here, so make your case here. He's got to bounce back.
He does, yeah. And so many horses had trouble in the Southwest. It's still a very hard race to read. And I didn't think the Rebel really cleaned it up anymore, because it felt like the horse, likes of Sandman ran well, but with excuses. I felt like Speed King, the winner of that Southwest Stakes that Patch Adams exits, I felt like Speed King had plenty of valid excuses for the poor performance in the Rebel, and it will be better next time out. But at the same time, you felt like Patch Adams still had opportunities to win that race. I'm willing to forgive it because overall the form has been good enough. And I do think he's just going to sit a really good trip in here. He'll let those speeds that we've mentioned earlier go and sit right off of him within a length or few, and be able to get first run on those Chancellor McPatricks, Hill Roads, and Filosos. And while they'll be coming, if this horse is fit and ready, like I'm sure Brad Cox has him, if he can sit that trip, I'm envisioning that first run will be very crucial over this track.
Yeah, my thing with him is the Southwest just really hasn't come back all that good. I mean, Sandman came back out of it to be okay, but Speed King and Tistastic came out of there to really not race very well in the next start in the Rebel. So it'll be interesting to see. Now, I think the short field helps him. The positioning helps him. The pace dynamics help him. The fact that he faces a couple returnees. I do think that he could end up falling into the perfect trip and the perfect scenario here for him. And maybe he's just a fast horse that just had trouble last time too. So lots going on there with Patch Adams. Very intriguing Tampa Bay Derby for Saturday. Part of a 12-race card at Tampa Bay Downs. Again, check out TwinSpires.com for the contests. They are just fast and furious daily. So jump in, get in on the TwinSpires.com contest tour. Lots of prize money to be won. Eric, thanks for doing this. Really enjoying the top 10s and hope to talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
This has been a production of In the Money Media. Check out all the extra videos. We're doing daily coverage right now on the In the Money YouTube channel. Check out the Michael McCarthy interview with PTF. Check out the top 10. There's so much out there. So jump in on the In the Money YouTube channel. We'll see you next time.